Yay, happy Monday, everybody, or good Monday morning is usually what I say. But you guys are listening to Author Talk with me, Amy Russell, and Sandy's back with us again this week. And our lovely author guest is Anthony Harris, who I have known for years and I absolutely love. So I'm so excited we could get you on. But you guys, let's dive into the weekends because Russell's just amped and ready to give me crap. But my house is painted. I went to visit my mom again this weekend. I left Friday morning. One of my nieces turned 8. Emma did on Saturday. So, what an excuse. I went to her birthday party with my kids so Josh could finish painting my house, and it looks wonderful. I love it. That's why I have my background open because I don't generally like virtual backgrounds, but my office is a hot mess. Okay, because let's just be real. So, it's not ready for
Would
any kind
you
of
tile
visit.
everything in your office while you're painting
I
the
guess he
outside?
did. I guess, but it's okay. My house got painted. I'm not going to complain about it.
No, no,
It's
I wouldn't either.
fabulous. Yeah, it's fabulous. I'm already looking for my next project, which I want to paint our cabinets. And he says he's not going to help me do that. But the reality of it is, I want to buy one of those paint guns, like the little spray paint guns. And that's my excuse to do it. So I'm
Okay,
going to do it.
I
I'm
have to tell the
excited.
audience it's pretty cool. Amy wants power tools.
I do.
She's
I
cool. She's
love it.
cool.
I'm excited. I'm excited for it 100%. But what all did everybody else do this weekend? Who wants to go first?
I'll
Russell.
go. So, this weekend, or including Friday and the weekend, I was at Buckhead Cigar Lounge. It's a steak place and in Atlanta, and and a pretty well-known stage actor came in. Big, tall guy, talks way too much, and we sat down and had a couple cigars together, and spent the whole time talking about method acting, which I'd gone down foxhole reading about, and he's a method actor, and we talked about how you learn your lines on for the stage, and then we got in a big discussion about Christian Bale, who he knows, and
Wow.
some of the legends of Christian Bale's method acting and the background of it. So it was a very cool weekend.
Wow. I'm shocked you didn't go see the Barbie movie. That nobody here has gone to see that movie or what is it, Oppenheimer? Is that the other movie? I don't know what that one's about, but I would go
Oh,
see
oh,
Oppenheimer.
oh, can I tell you one other thing? So,
Yes.
my nephew, remember like years ago when he was in college, I got him to do a little piece when we thought about doing music at the
Yes.
beginning before we found the true and tested Amy up
Yeah.
energy thing that we do instead.
Yes.
And he wound up after he graduated going to Los Angeles, and he has a credit at the bottom of the Oppenheimer movie.
Wow.
Oh my gosh.
I'm so proud of him.
Yay.
That's amazing. Shout out to him.
I
That's
hope he
pretty
gets some
cool.
of that, however many
Residual.
hundreds of millions of dollars they
No,
make.
but he does get little,
The credit.
even from other movies he's written music for already. He does get a little change of starting to get those checks. And he and his wife, and they're very young, so this is very impressive. They've opened a bank account. They're never going to spend any of those monies. That's going into their savings automatically. And I think that's very impressive that at 23 or so, you're that adult
I
these
love it.
days.
Think so, yes.
I love it. Sandy, what did you
Well,
do?
my weekend was not quite so much fun because I spent it. My husband took a COVID test. Our granddaughter has had COVID all week, but she has stayed upstairs, never came downstairs except to go to the kitchen, or when she went around the other way. Anyway, somehow, whether he got it from her or somebody else, my husband was positive for COVID. And those of you that know that we talked about that a lot. He is a kidney transplant recipient, so he's on immunosuppressant drugs all the time, and so for him to get COVID is worse than if anybody else. Just Me, worse than me getting it. So we did get permission for him to take the drug that's on the market now for COVID, and we're waiting to see. He felt really horrible all night, but today he feels a little bit better. I tested yesterday and still test negative. So, but that was the extent of my weekend, was taking care of all the COVID people in the house and trying to stay away from them at the same time. So
Avoiding them.
I'm looking forward to this week, a long week of probably the same thing. But anyway, so we're just making sure David's taken care of, the main thing.
Yeah, I hope David starts to feel better. At least he could take the medication that's out there. That's good.
Yep, that is a good thing. So
I get it. Anthony, what about you? What did you do this weekend?
Nothing as exciting as some, but I was basically homebound and spent some time on video anyway with my little older than 1 year old grandson. He lives in Austin, and my son usually at least once a week or so he will dial us in and we will chat with him. And he's starting to walk. He's starting to get around, and it is just a wonderful thing as a new grandparent, and to see him moving about, being independent, being exploring, doing those things that a 1 year old is supposed to do. So that's what we did. We just tried to stay cool. We also had air conditioning issues at our home. That's been taken care of. We still need the HVAC person to come out and do some tweaking because the outside unit is making some noises we think it ought not to be making, and we spent way too much money to hear that kind of noise. So
Anthony, here's the thing: air conditioning only breaks from Friday night to Sunday night.
Yeah.
Why is that? That's the only time it breaks.
Yes. Plumbing, all those things. It's on weekends. They seem to just happen.
It's
on
a freaking nightmare.
Yeah. But yeah, we're good. We had like most of my weekends, they just don't last long enough for Monday again, and so
they don't last. Anthony, what we say around our house is, "What's a weekend?"
Yes,
we're both retired, my husband and I. Somebody said, "We're going to do that this weekend," and we're like, "What's a weekend?"
Yeah. I recall right after I retired, I told someone, I said, every day seems like Friday to me. The next day is Saturday. I don't have to worry about going to work or going to meetings or anything like that. So now that I'm back working full time again, I do have to
remember that what it is. Yeah.
So I want to thank our podcast listeners. Anthony, most people don't even watch us on Monday morning. There goes a truck up the mountain next to me. Most people listen to us during the week on the podcast. We're top 10 independent book podcasts in America. We're very honored, and we thank people for listening to us. Amy, where can they find us?
Yeah, so you guys can find us anywhere that you can listen to podcasts: Amazon Music, Spotify, Apple, that's iTunes. So Apple, Google, Good Pod, Stitcher, all of those, you can find us. But like Russell said, we are just incredibly grateful and just humbled to know that, because it was Russell's idea. It was actually Russell and Sandy that started it, and then I just kind of videoed it, and now it's evolved into what it is. But we love hearing from authors and others in the writing community.
You were the tech person to start.
I was the techie. I loved it. It was so much fun. So it's been amazing to see it grow and to meet so many amazing and talented authors and publishers and just all that are involved in the writing community, like Anthony himself, that have done some amazing things and have very many works under their belt. I also have the book Mixed, and I read it to my children. It is an amazing children's book. It is one of my favorite that I always go to read. So it is a beautifully written book. So with all that being said, Sandy, let's get Anthony talking about his books, but Russell has something first.
Before Sandy gets going, Anthony, I was reading your bio again this morning, and it talked about your civil rights work during the civil rights battles. And I thought this was, I really enjoyed reading that. And I wonder, do you have an interesting story about when you were arrested during the civil rights battles?
Yes, thank you, Russell, for asking me that. It's included in a book that I wrote called "Ain't Gonna Let Nobody Turn Me Around." In fact, that's the very first book I ever published. Was sort of an autobiography, coming of age story. But in that particular incident you're referring to, Russell, um, my brother, my older brother James, a friend of mine named Ratio, we were out there on this picket line on this cold, wet January morning. And the city of Hattiesburg, where I was living, had passed a city ordinance that said that no one under the age of 18 would be allowed on a picket line. Now, this was in response to what was going on uh, throughout the South, and give you a little historical context for how we got to that point. Um, the what I would call the pro civil rights forces and the anti civil rights forces were playing this chess match. The anti-civil rights forces said, okay, all of these people, these adults who are demonstrating, marching, picketing, what we'll do is just arrest them and put them in jail. And that's what they did. They arrested these adults. And then the pro-civil rights people said, if you're going to put the adults in jail, what we'll do is put children out there on picket lines and marches and demonstrations. And we dare you to treat these children the way you've treated those adults with the billy clubs and water hoses and attack dogs and so forth. And then the counter move to that counter move was, okay, the city said, okay, no one under the age of 18 can participate in a demonstration. So in defiance of that ordinance, uh, the three of us, as I said, my older brother James and my one of my friends, Ratio, we showed up on this cold, wet January morning, and we were just marching around the courthouse there in Hattiesburg, and we had signs around our necks with statements like, "Let my people vote. Freedom is freedom ain't free. You've got to work for it." Some messages, some very positive, uplifting messages. And we had been out there maybe half an hour, and a police officer pulled up to the curb, and he officer. There were two officers. They jumped out of their squad car, rushed over to the three of us, tore the signs off our necks, and threw us into the back of the squad car. And a gentleman by the name of Lawrence Guillot, who was with SNCC, or Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, he was out there to supervise us to make sure nothing was, that we would be safe. And then when we were in the rear of the police car, he came over and knelt down um, at eye level. He said, "Boys, don't worry, everything's going to be okay." And of course, we knew full well it was not up to Mr. Guillot as to whether or not we would be okay. It was up to these police officers, um, as it would be up to them as to whether we would be okay. And that became even more clear as we drove off. And the officer in the passenger seat picked up his two-way radio, and he said, "Headquarters, have the dogs been fed today?" "Oh, they haven't." "Well, we're bringing fresh meat in for them." And I'm thinking, all right, I know what kind of police dogs they're talking about. So we made it to the police station, and we marched down this long corridor. And this winter time, it was cold, and I was shivering. My brother and my friend, and we were all shivering from the cold and the fear. As we walked into that police station, there was only one thing on my mind, and you can imagine, I want to hear the sounds of barking dogs. I want to know, where are the dogs, and how do I escape those dogs if they start chasing me? And we got into this interrogation room. There were chairs in that room, and they would not allow us to sit in those chairs. We had to sit on this cold, wet cement floor with our backs pressed up against this cold, wet cement wall. And the officer kept intimidating us with telling us we had no right to be out there. We were breaking the law. And then he pulled out of his back pocket a blackjack. And if you don't know what a blackjack is, it's a small piece of lead wrapped in black leather that officers use to subdue people they're trying to arrest. And he started walking to us and tossing it from hand to hand in a very threatening, menacing kind of way. And he said, "Boys, you know what we do with this, don't you?" And we paused and said, "Yes, sir." He said, "This is what we use to beat black people's rear ends." And he didn't say black people, and he didn't say rear end. And I thought to myself, okay, we managed to not get eaten by the dogs. Now we're going to get beaten to death in this room. And about that time, the door to this room opens up with this loud bang, bam. In rushes this petite black woman yelling at these officers, "Let them go now. You have no right to hold them." I said, "Let them go now." That was my mom.
I was going to say, I bet that was your mother.
That was my mother. That was Daisy. I had never been happier to see my mother as I was when and I tell people, she didn't knock on the door. She didn't ask for permission to come in. She went in and she didn't ask, would you please let these boys go? She said, do what you need to do to me. And as she knew two things. One, there was an injustice taking place that needed to be addressed. Secondly, like most parents, especially mothers, if your babies are at risk, you're going to do what you need to do to take care of them, and that's what she did. So that's the story about being arrested. These officers listened to my mom. They said, "This lady is serious." So I say these officers did what we kids did when she raised her voice, and that's do exactly as she said. So they let
That
us
was
go.
a beautiful story. Thank you so
Thank you.
much.
You're
And
welcome.
he's got a whole book of stories like that about his mother, his
Yes, I
mom.
do.
What is the name of that book?
It's called Faith, Family, Friends, and Freedom: The Life and Legacy of Daisy Harris. She was an icon. She is somebody um, who inspired so many people in our community. And after she passed away, I wanted to write a book to pay homage to her, to inform others who did not know her of the legacy and the giant footprint she left in our community, in our family, and in our hearts.
She was very active in the civil rights movement
Oh,
for.
absolutely. She was very active. She was the reason her boys were active. Is that she was, anytime there was a meeting, a march, or whatever, she brought her three boys along with
What a
her.
great legacy. What a
Yes,
great legacy. I hope
absolutely.
you're passing that along to your grandchildren.
Oh, let me tell you, back in, I think it was like 93 or 90, I think it was 93. I had attended the Million Man March in Washington, D.C. When I came back to where I was living in Commerce, Texas, there were some Black gentlemen in a neighboring community, Greenville, Texas, who asked me if I would organize a similar march in Greenville that was similar to the one we had gone to in D.C. on a much smaller scale, of course. And I agreed to do that. And we organized the march, and I took my son with me. He was like 13 years old at the time. And I said, this is an intergenerational thing. My mom used to take me to marches. Now I'm taking my son to marches. It says um, that's a good thing, and I wanted him to be there. But it also says why we're still doing things in '93 that we did in '63. What kind of progress are we making? We're still having to march and demonstrate on these issues.
So we could go on and on about all your books, and I would love to have time to do that, Anthony. But I know today you wanted to kind of focus your interview and your talk on. Is this your latest book?
No, it's the next to the most recent book.
Okay.
Just give you a little background here. I did a series of novels I call the Fruits series. The first book in the series, a three-book series, Fruits of a Disgraced Legacy, Fruits of a Dying Legacy, and Fruits of a Dead Legacy. And it was about this southern cabals, you might call them redneck mafia, who wanted to start a race war. And throughout the three books, we see how it started, how it culminated in some really exciting kinds of things. And there are some characters from that last book in the series that I brought forward to this new series called the Jefferson-Davis Investigation Agency. And this agency they specialize in cold cases that involve hate crimes. And the book that's going to be done into a movie is called the Jefferson-Davis Investigation Agency, the case of Elbert, Eugene, Washington. And so that's the book. It's the first in the series of three. The second book that I wrote in that series was the Jefferson-Davis Investigation Agency, the case of Moses Jackson. So the first one is going to be about Elbert Eugene Washington, who was a high school kid who just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time and was murdered. And the case went unsolved for a number of years, despite his mother constantly asking the police what's going on, and they just shunned her and wouldn't answer a question. So she finally asked the investigation agency to come in, and in short time they solved the crime. And
So what's the name of the first one in the series?
It's called the Jefferson-Davis. Jefferson-Davis. They are two characters from the previous Fruit series. Um, Linwood Jefferson and Cheryl Davis are their names. And that one is called The Case of Elbert, Eugene, Washington.
Yeah. I see that now.
Yeah.
Okay. I
And
was looking
the
through
other
your
one, yeah, the other one is the case of Moses Jackson.
Moses Jackson. I saw
Yeah.
that one. I just couldn't.
And I've begun working on a third one. This will probably be the final in that series of cold cases that this investigation agency will solve.
So tell us about the movie aspect. How did this happen?
Well, it was sort of serendipitous in a way. I thought, and people kept telling me, Anthony, have you ever tried to get your books made into a movie? Why don't you send them to Spike Lee or some of these producers? I said, they wouldn't give me the time of day, no. So I contacted a company in Georgia called Higher Heights Production Company and spoke to the owner and director and producer in that company. Just so happened, I know her. She grew up in Commerce, Texas. She's been in about 42 movies, and
Did you know before you called that you knew her?
I knew her. Yes, I knew her.
Okay.
We were on Facebook together, and she had been sending out some messages. I remember one. She said she gets a lot of questions from people wanting to know how to get a part in a movie, and she said you have to audition, and that was her message. I said, Sharice, she has her own production company. Let me contact her and see if she might be interested. So I sent her about 5 of my books, the Fruit series and the 2 on the Jefferson-Davis Investigation Agency. And she said her team decided they want to do the one on um, um, Elbert Eugene Washington, the case of Elbert Eugene Washington. It's a period piece, she calls it, and they've been wanting to do something along that line. So we have been in negotiations, and I mean, I'm learning so much about
There's a lot to.
and I've got a lot more to learn. What we're doing now is we're at the point of looking for locations. It's probably going to be filmed in Mississippi. We have to, of course, with the Screen Actors Guild strike going on, there's nothing going on. You can't even talk to an actor now. And one of the things that we have to do is find someone with a marquee name to be in the movie, so people will want to come out. It for no other reason than this particular marquee name person is in the movie. So we have lots of things to do: location, wardrobe,
Do you have
soundtrack.
any ideas in mind for that? I'm
For
always interested in who's going to play that
oh,
part.
I tell you, I really don't know. I mean, there's some actors who probably are not at the level as a Denzel Washington,
Yeah,
uh,
that's who
or
came to my
Forrest
mind.
or Forrest Whitaker, but it will probably be somebody at the what I would call the mid level of prominence and familiarity with the general public. And the 2 main characters in the show are Cheryl Davis. I mean, in the book of Cheryl Davis and um, Linwood Jefferson. Of course, this is all fiction. It's in a fictitious town in Mississippi, and it'll be fun trying to identify who might be ideal for that. They want me to be on the set when it's filming, so that I can have some input as to whether or not this is going the way
That's
that.
very good if you get
Yeah,
to have input. Yes.
yeah. They've already written the screenplay. The script is written. And
Oh
of course,
wow.
Can I ask a question about that?
Sure.
So, do you have any interesting little stories about dealing with the writers of the screenplay?
Not really. I guess the thing that sort of surprised me on the one hand, but didn't surprise me that much, is that how do you convert a book into a screenplay? And one of the things that Cherie said that we would have to do is reduce a 320 some odd page novel down to about 90 pages or 100 pages of script, because each page is a minute. Each page in the script is a minute, and we don't want to go over an hour and a half. When you start going into 2 hour movies, people don't want to sit
Yeah.
there and watch a 2 hour movie. So how do you condense all that? And one of the ways they do that is I might have, I'm very descriptive, as most writers are, using texture to describe a particular scene, how people are dressed and so forth. Well, that doesn't have to be in the screenplay. It's on
Right.
film. They can see she's dressed in a yellow dress with a ribbon tied in her hair. There's a scene of a funeral, and in the book, I go to some detail about what the preacher is preaching about. But she said, in this scene, we'll just show the church, and we show a casket being um, taken out of the church, and people will know. So that's interesting how you go from being um, descriptive. They want you to show, not just tell. Okay, when you're doing that, but with the movie, they can do a lot more showing than we can do when writing the book.
I never thought about that, but that's very true. That all the pages that have descriptive language or describe the scenery or anything, it can
Yes,
go away because
that can
we
go away,
see.
right? Hmm. Yeah, the first draft of the uh, screenplay was like 260 something pages. And I said, no, we've got a lot of work to do. And that's hard to do. I mean, and she said, don't worry about that, because even when they start filming, the script will undergo even more changes, because as they sit down at the table and talk through the dialogue, somebody might say, or the script supervisor will say, let's cut out that word. Let's use another sentence instead of that one. So it's a dynamic document, and it will continue to change over time.
So far, your experience has been a positive one. Then
Absolutely, been very
that
positive. I'm looking forward to the next steps. I told Sharice, I said, I'm from Mississippi, so I can really start scouting around for some locations. And it's a period piece, late '60s, early '70s, looking at automobiles and for that period, and dress, the wardrobe. Yeah, Russell.
So I have another question feeding on that. The production company is based in Georgia.
Yes.
Much of the production done on films now is done in Georgia. It's why I had that happening meeting with the stage actor, because he's down here doing production,
Right.
film production, or he was before the strike, of course.
Right.
He's not doing anything now. That's
Yeah.
why he had time for a cigar on Friday. But nevertheless, I would be surprised if they would do the film in Mississippi instead of getting similar places in Georgia to pretend,
Yeah.
because of the tax benefits.
Yeah. And there's some tax incentives in Mississippi, Georgia, and Texas. The tax incentives in Texas are not as robust as they are in Georgia. And when we first talked about location, she did say we can do this in the Dallas area, or we can do it in the Jackson, Mississippi area. And so Texas may still be on the list. Douglasville, Georgia may still be on the list. I think so many pieces have to be worked out. I kind of would like for it to be done in Mississippi, um, and in their companies and movie companies to come and do movies in Mississippi. So we'll see. We're not sure where it's going to be, but it'll either be in Georgia, Texas, or in Mississippi.
wow. Okay, I mean it's moving right along then, and
Yeah, it is. And
except for
they
the
won't start production, assuming that the strike will end. Say if it ended tomorrow, we're looking at starting maybe spring of 2024. And of course, if the strike lasts any longer than 6 months or so, that pushes everything back. But I'm patient. I'm willing to work with that. Hopefully, this movie will garner some attention, and somebody will take interest in the second book in that series about Moses Jackson. And then, as I said, I'm working on a third one uh, in the series, and hopefully, it can be something Netflix or somebody else might be interested in taking a look at.
That would be great. So if she continues and you continue with the publishing, I mean not publishing, but what do they call it when it's a movie? I guess it's not publishing it, but releasing it, or
Yeah, the release date, the launch date for the movie. Yes.
so if you continue with her and everything, nobody buys it or anything, then what kind of visibility will you have with her?
Well, she recently signed a contract with a large distribution company, movie distribution company, to do a 3 movie deal, and mine is one of the 3 that the production company has agreed to do, and the distribution company has agreed to. Um, Once you get into the weeds and look at, residuals, selling it, all those things, it's, lawyers lawyers will have to get in, look at drafts of this and say, no, 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 this is, I mean, she's already prepared me for, if I decide to sell it, um, there's a certain threshold to look at in terms of what's a selling price. And, say the distribution company is going to lowball you. They're going to try to, but so we're going to have lawyers said, I'm used to this. I know how they work. So we're not going to let that happen. And so one of the options I have is to invest some of my own money in the project and receive residuals from that, or to just sell it outright to the distribution company. And we haven't made a decision on that yet, looking at options. But I'm just excited it's going to get to the small screen or the big screen or something. And um,
I think it's very exciting. And anybody that I ever knew or ever talked to who had books that became movies went through exactly what you're going through now,
yeah,
and that's having, looking, have other people look at it. The big hope, of course, is that, you know, Disney or one of the others, big ones, would see it and say, "Yeah, we want that movie," and they would start it over and
yeah,
whatever. And that's what I remember them saying. We're going to be pitching it to Disney and pitching it to whomever. And there was a person in Houston that went to, I'd have to look up her full name. It was Marilyn. You probably know her because she's been involved in a lot of the communities that you have been. But
mm,
she went there to go to a training for a year
mm.
on pitching a movie. Remember her? And
Yeah, we had her on the show.
we did.
Marilyn Harris?
Marilyn Harris, yeah. Well, that's funny. The same last name as you.
We
But
might be related. Who knows? Huh?
maybe. But she actually, her business became the number one small business in Houston, for minorities. And she's been just real active in anything to do with, helping minorities and helping people get. And then
Oh,
she went to for a year to that training in L.A. And
mm.
I mean, there was nothing shy about her. If she didn't have a hotel room for the night and she didn't have enough money for one, she would ask people there, "Do you have an extra room? I just need a place just to
I
spend
love
the
it.
night." So, but she did get very involved in movies and how to get Fox or Disney or somebody
Okay.
like that involved. I'll see if I can get in
If
touch
you
with.
could get that and send it to me, I'd
I
appreciate it.
will.
Thanks
I
so
will.
much.
Just
Yeah.
because she always had some pointers for
Yeah.
everybody. She had pointers.
There's
So
always something we can learn no matter
yeah,
what's going
absolutely.
on.
And she was just really out there learning this. I will.
Yeah.
I really had forgotten about her. I haven't heard from her for a while. So I've lost contact with so many people being retired. That part of it I don't like. I like not having to worry about weekends, but I don't like not knowing what's going on with people. I love being around people. So I did read. I was reading your book this morning, reading your bio. I'd actually read your dedication page and saw where it was dedicated to your mother,
Yes.
and I saw that you said something about it wasn't your mother, it was your wife that was dedicated to, right? The book I was looking at, it was dedicated to your wife, and you said because she understands that writing to you just brings happiness and joy
Oh yeah,
in your life. However you said that, I
yeah,
loved that dedication.
yeah. That was directly from the heart because I mean, people who write know that it becomes something is ignited, something stirs around, and you just need to spend time on the keyboard, just writing and thinking and creating. And um, she's always been there to encourage me and to know that sometimes I've learned over time my disposition is such that when I'm not writing, I feel a little like something's missing. I need to be doing something. So I will have to carve out some time and carve out some space so that I can indulge in it. I might just, you know, do some typing for an hour or two and come out and I get this momentum going and I don't want to stop. And I'm creating these characters and so forth. So it's,
Well,
but
you
yeah,
definitely done a lot. How many books have you written?
14,
14? It looks like
14.
a lot more than that at Amazon because I just put your name in. There's all these books.
Yeah,
So,
it's 14, and I did another series for children. It's a chapter book. Um, it's about little Mikey, um,
oh, I did see
and
that.
I did the Adventures of Little Mikey was the first one, and the second was More Adventures of Little Mikey, and just to make a three, I'm going to write another in that series to make it three, and write a third one for the Jefferson-Davis Investigation Agency to make that three. So that would be three series that I will have completed with three books in each of them.
Well, that's awesome. That's good. So congratulations, first of all. But
No, thank
that's
you.
amazing that you've got done all that. Plus, kept up with your career at the same
Yeah.
time, working
Well,
on
I
this.
have to just say I am so delighted that you and Amy came into my life. Um, we met years ago when
There,
I
long
had
time.
published a book with Tandem Light Press with Dr. Pam Larday.
That's
And,
how it was. I'm like, how did we meet you? But
yeah,
that's right, it was with them.
and,
Yes.
and part of the deal I had with her company was that I would get X number of months of marketing with you, Sandy. And then we talked about creating a website, and that's when you brought Amy into my life, and she designed my website and keeps it going. And so I have to say, without the input, the support, and the work the two of you did for me, uh, I couldn't have done it without you. I appreciate that.
Well, I believe you could have done it without us, but thank you for saying that because I do think we made it easier and we made it better then. But you
Yes.
you would have found a way, I am sure, to get around that. But I am glad that you were with Tandem Light Press,
Right.
and then glad that you through them that you were with us because we did love our arrangement with them, and
Yes.
we worked with quite a few. I was actually on vacation in Alabama, which is where I'm from, and one of our clients at that time drove 2 hours to come over and meet me in person. So it's been very exciting to me to work with authors and to see some of the things they do. And so, as we're coming to a close, are we? Oh, we are getting close to close time.
We are, but I have a question I'm dying to ask, and so
Okay, go right ahead.
I don't want to end without it. So I noticed that your first two books of this series has to do with murders in Mississippi.
Hmm.
Do you, because you're from there, do you concentrate on Mississippi? Do you consider stories outside of Mississippi?
I am from Mississippi. I'm familiar with the milieu. I'm familiar with the past racial landscapes in that state and the current landscape in that state. And there are times when our characters there, as you have characters, they have to be multidimensional. They just can't be all bad guys or all good guys. And there are times when I try to point out some very positive things about the state of Mississippi. But I think lending credibility to the storyline, it has to be in the South. It could be in Alabama. It could be in Louisiana. It can't be in Montana because of the dynamics and the dialogue and the history of what went on in those states. I just had to incorporate the reality of the history of Mississippi, how that legacy of Jim Crowism and segregation and racism, even though that was in the past, it still today has an impact on people's lives.
And that brings me to my second question,
Okay.
which is the crimes that you write about, are they concentrated on a particular era? Do you have you ever considered going early back
Yes.
more? And
Right.
is there any kind of police investigation or publicity at the time that you need to help write it, or do you go beyond that?
I do my own research, and I have a good friend who is in law enforcement. I will bounce things off of him. I have a cousin who recently moved to this area who was a retired Washington, D.C. Capitol Police officer. Uh, and he's always said, if you need to consult with me, or I need to consult with you, we'll do that. But I don't have. I'm probably lost the train of thought that you were asking me about there. Why don't you ask me that again? Or the first part of it anyway.
Well, here's the reason I asked. So
Okay.
I have a good friend that I've actually shared a cigar with. He's actually one of the more famous Zydeco musicians in
Yeah. I
America.
love Zydeco music. Yes.
And we were having a cigar one day, and he told me a story about his grandfather, who was also a Zydeco musician, uh, was at a performance in Louisiana one night, and a white woman came up and told him how great he was and borrowed his handkerchief and wiped the sweat from her face. And he was hung that night by a bunch of men because of that.
Yeah.
And of course, nobody ever was charged with anything.
And in my second book with Moses Jackson, a character, he's a famous blues singer, and Moses had lots of hits with this record company that was owned by this guy named Preacher. And the more his sales, the more his songs went up the charts, the less money he got as residuals, and he got into a interracial dating relationship with somebody, and that's what led to his death. Um, so yeah, sometimes life imitates art, art imitates life, and so I'm glad you mentioned that because the part of the plot and the theme to the book about Moses Jackson is just that. Um, he violated that unwritten but very harsh Jim Crow law about interracial dating in the course of anything. So, yeah.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you
You're
very
welcome.
much for explaining that.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole show, as we were going, I was like, where does he get his stories? How far will he go
Yeah.
back? Because this one was like 1920s.
Yeah. In fact, I was about to say earlier, the third book in the series is going to go back into the 40s or 50s, and it's going to involve an interracial couple driving through Mississippi during that era, and because of their out-of-state license plates and um, the fact that it's an interracial couple, something's going to happen to them. And
Hmm.
my parents used to tell me all the time that and it never got reported that friends and relatives and acquaintances that would drive from Chicago to Mississippi, sometimes they never made it to Mississippi, and or they never made it back to Chicago. And the suspicion is that something happened. You remember the movie, um, the Green the Green Book? I think that was the name of it.
The Green Book, yes,
Yeah,
yes, that was a great
that,
movie.
that was legitimate. And if you didn't have access to the Green Book to know where you should not go and where it was safe to go, you could end up bad things happening. And this couple that I'm going to write about in the next book, uh, they will they will succumb to that kind of irony is that you're minding your business, you're going to visit people, and because you don't have the green book to know where you should and should not spend time, you end up losing your life for it.
Hmm.
Anthony, we could listen to your stories on and on, but we do need to
I
call it.
know.
It's we reached about the end of our time, but it
Okay.
was absolutely wonderful to see you again.
It
So
was
when
my pleasure.
you told me the guest today, I'm like, oh my God, I get to be on with Anthony. So I couldn't have planned it better myself, and I'm only on when Fern can't make it. But it was great that I got to see you and got to talk to you, got to hear more about your books, and I look forward to the next time we get together.
Okay.
And uh, best wishes for the movie. Make sure you let us know
I will.
when it happens so
Yeah.
we can be promoting that. But thank you again for being on this morning.
You're very welcome. And I say again, thank you to Cindy and Amy and Russell. Good to meet you. I really like your questions. I like your passion. I like that. I like how you were engaged in the conversation. And thank you. This was good.
Oh,
He's
good.
It was Russell's
Yeah.
idea. We started this 8 years ago, so we've been
I
doing it
know.
8
You guys
years.
are so kind.
Good to see.
Anthony, before we go, would you tell people where they can find your books?
They're all on Amazon,
Mhm.
Amazon.com. And if they will just in the search box, Anthony, middle initial J, and it's important they put the initial J there because there's some other Anthony Harris's authors there. Obviously, they're not me, so I have to inform people. Jay, I have an authors page there on Amazon. If you can get to that, also at my website that Amy has designed for me. Most of my books, I'm not haven't looked at it lately, but the books are there, and there's a link to Amazon for each of those books, along with the description of each book.
Yes, absolutely. But Anthony, it's just wonderful to know you and to, when Sandy brought me on to kind of help out, it's just been lovely to stay in touch and that we had the cancellation today to have you on. It was just perfect timing. I'm excited for all of the opportunities that you have and the things that you write and all of the books. And I
Yeah.
love that you write in series and completions of threes, which I find to be so
Yeah.
fascinating and cool. But all of your books are amazing. So
Well,
I'm
thank
just
you.
honored for the opportunity to get to know you and to call you one of my friends. I think it's
Well, good.
amazing.
And I have to say, when I first met you, you didn't have any kids, and now you would have two.
I do. I have two. According to
Two
Russell,
kids
I have
later.
500, but I only have two. But thanks for taking time out of your morning,
Okay.
Anthony. I know you came out of retirement to come and hang out with us and to talk and to tell us, that your book's being made into a film. I feel like that's every author's dream, and so I'm so happy that it's happening for you, and I can't wait to see it. So you have to let us know when it comes out. But for everybody else, we hope that you all have a fantastic Monday, a great rest of your day, and until next time, bye for now, everybody.